Thought is a part of our series on nutrition as it relates to not only oncology, but general nutrition. My name is Stacy Fritz. I am one of 4 fabulous team members for our patient advocacy group for Believe Big. I'm also the owner of Fit to Order, which is a corporate wellness company located in Baltimore, Maryland. I also want to introduce my co-host here, Paula Weinberg. She is the owner of HealthSpan Nutrition. She does private nutrition counseling for those who are on the journey. And then she also is going to be not only my co-host, but she's going to be my guardrails. The reason why is because I'm very specific about the lane that I'm in. Today's conversation is my lane, but I want to make sure that you all have all the information that you might need that I might not be able to answer because of my scope. So that said, again, Stacy Fritz and Paula Weinberg, and today we're going to be talking about honoring and cherishing your food. This is a great topic because it's an opportunity to offer a sense of calm and a sense of gratitude for the food before us. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Paula, do you have 12 o'clock on the dot?
I do.
Yeah. So Paul and I are actually switching roles a little bit. If you join us for Food for Thought, Paula, oftentimes I do the facilitating where I'm looking at the questions that you might be asking and I'm firing them to Paula. So I'm a little nervous because Paula might be firing them back to me today. Anyway, so today Paula and I were just discussing, we don't want to make any assumptions for those people who are calling in, but today is Ash Wednesday. And we thought perhaps maybe folks were using their lunch hour to go get their ashes. Now, listen, again, we're talking about, you see a picture of a prayer in front of you. It's just an example of something I want to share with you, actually kind of a funny story. And then because it is a small crew, I would love to hear your feedback. So you can throw it in the chat or you can throw it in the Q&A, and you can find that down at the bottom of your screen very easily to pop a question in there or a comment. So I grew up Christian, and grace was always a part of our meals, always a part of our meals. My mother insisted. And so I was one of 2 children. I am one of 2 children. And being that we were children, my brother and I would often, when it was our turn to say grace, we would try to buck the system a little bit. And so one in particular that would send my mother through the roof, he would say, good food, good meat, good God, let's eat. Right. And so my mother would get so upset because she thought it was so disrespectful. My brother and I would be giggling, but I want to give you an opportunity to put in the chat there if you had any misfires when it came to grace or any funny poems that you used to say that kind of missed the mark on what grace was really about. Paula, I'm going to ask you, anything that you see your kids say funny or you said funny growing up with grace?
No, I actually did not grow up saying grace at all as a kid, and it's not something we did as a family either in my current family, because we have 2 different religions, and it became too tricky to navigate those waters of you know, it really isn't, in retrospect, it really isn't that tricky, but at the time it seemed daunting to try to come up with the right thing for that. Neither my husband or I grew up saying something around meals, so it didn't feel natural to force a new thing. But
well, if any of our listeners have any experience with grace, like I said before, my mother was pretty confident on wanting to have that be a part of our mealtime. But again, my brother and I being little, we would try to, kind of misguide grace and kind of try to be funny or whatnot. So I say this because looking back now in hindsight, I realized that my mother was offering us an incredible opportunity. One, she was offering us an opportunity to be grateful to God for what he was providing, but also it was a chance to offer respect and gratitude for the food that was before us. Now, let me be super clear. This isn't a conversation about prayer. And as Paula just mentioned, we all come from with our different backgrounds and our different beliefs and whatnot. But I'm simply sharing with you, if prayer is something that you do before your meals, this is an opportunity to highlight that is a pause, that is a mindfulness moment where you are doing something to create an atmosphere. So I also want you to know that there are other things, hence the reason why we are on the call today, that we can offer ourselves and the people that we are with, that it's a grounding and a centering practice, to get really aware of what's getting ready to happen, this meal. Okay. So I share that with you because for many of you who are already doing something before your meals, you've already started the process of a little bit of mindfulness. So just a little bit of an opener, but plenty of places to go, which is the reason why we are here. All right. So maybe you're sitting in there, you're saying to yourself, Stacy, but we are already busy. And now you want us to mindfully eat, right? I get it. But I do believe that there is tremendous value in taking a few moments to be intentional and conscious about what's getting ready to happen. It sets the tone for the meal, and it allows the body, the mind, and the soul to be in preparation for the meal that's ahead of you. So there is value. And I do understand that our life is quite busy. I mean, many of us are driving in a car and perhaps maybe eating meals while we're driving, or eating while we are on the go, maybe eating at our desk. But this is about today taking a moment to acknowledge even the simplest of meals and putting a mindful and a grateful practice in front of it. And if I do my job well today, Paula will let me know that we will have a few practices that you might consider, So maybe you're even sitting there saying to me out loud, but Stacy, I have this other thing going on. Not only am I busy and I'm doing all the things, but perhaps maybe if you're listening, you have the burden of a diagnosis, you're on this healing journey, or maybe you are a loved one that is taking care of somebody who's on the journey. I mean, you're busy, right? And part of the reason why that may feel overwhelming, even the topic of mindfully eating, is that you are trying to figure out the wild, wild west of nutrition. What are the right foods to eat? And that's not necessarily this conversation today, but I would argue that mindful eating also gives us the opportunity to add in an additional tool to our toolkit for healing, right? And setting the stage for finding calm and peace and understanding how food plays into your healing journey. Now, Paula and Jen have shared with us month after month the specifics of the nutrition piece, but I believe that this is also an important part of the practice, right? And being able to get our mind and our body in the right space includes the food that we eat. So that's what we're talking about today. And my goal is to make it as easy on you as possible. So whether or not you know a lot about nutrition or you don't know a lot about nutrition, I want to set the stage with this quote that I really do appreciate. Where the focus goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, whatever you're focusing on grows. And I'm going to explain that a little deeper, but I believe what you focus on is a part of your healing journey too. So mindful eating isn't just about what we're going to get into with the food aspect. It's about setting the tone for your meals. All right. Questions? Anybody? I see a bunch of things in the chat, Paula. Where are we?
I didn't want to interrupt you, but
yeah, I'm ready.
As we had kind of moved past the prayer, some of these traditions people were posting.
Oh, let me hear.
People were posting the prayers that they've been, either used to saying or did say as they were growing up. Bonnie says that she says, "Bless this food that's set before us and give us thankful hearts. Amen."
I love.
Sarah says her prayer was or is, grant us thy grace of Lord, that whatsoever we eat or drink, that we do it all to thy name and glory. That was her daily grace before eating all meals. Rita reports that she grew up on a farm in Kentucky and grew everything that they ate and blessed every meal, and continues to do so. And she is 61 now. And Bonnie says, when she married her Catholic husband, the prayer was, "Bless us, O Lord, for these thy gifts, which we are about to receive through Christ our Lord. Amen." And Sarah just reported a correction in what she had typed in her prayer, but it's the same prayer. So yes,
listen, you all behaved much better than me and my brother trying to buck the system there a little bit. And I love all those. Now, again, what I love more is the fact that you all are engaging and you're interacting and communicating with Paula and me. That's the point of this, even though we're staying high level and not talking about specific diagnosis and situations and whatnot. What we can do is create community and offer each other some joy. I love those prayers. I really do. I even love the prayer that my brother said as a kid, because like I said, I can remember being in the chair and just waiting for it. And he would say the prayer and she would be like, oh no, we're not doing it that way. So let's get into the specifics. I'm going to give you a little bit of content, and then I'm going to give you some real practical uses for mindful and gratitude practices. So what is exactly mindful eating? I don't ever want to make an assumption, because as we talk amongst ourselves, sometimes we throw around jargon and folks aren't always really well versed on what we are speaking about. So mindfulness in its simplest form, it's about being in the moment, being aware. It's about whatever you're eating and drinking, consuming at each of those meals, and how that makes you feel, the sensations. You are right there. You're not doing anything else. How hard is that, you guys? How hard is that these days? We are a culture of busy. We even use the word busy to describe ourselves. That's not really a fair statement. We're not busy. We just are busy doing activities. So as I mentioned before, even down to the simplest of meals, we've gotten away from what I think was really special back in the day, which was family time and sitting at a table with conversation and not all the distractions. Now, if that was not how you were brought up, I'm again simply sharing my individual experience with this, but I must call it the lost art of the dinner table, I think many of us still try to keep that in practice, but the reality is our lifestyle is not really supportive of that. And so we find ourselves in the car, at our desk eating, and it's actually the opposite of mindful. It's mindless eating. And sometimes we're even eating when we're not even hungry. Right? Sometimes we're eating to fill something emotionally, whether or not it's loneliness or boredom or stress or to cope. So again, just to reiterate, the idea of mindful eating is that is what you are doing. And it can even extend beyond just the act of eating. It can extend into your shopping. It can extend into your prep work. It can extend into conversations around the dinner table. And I'd love for us to bring back the lost art. I say dinner time because mindful eating isn't something that I would say that if I said to you, you must do this at every single meal, I think that would be quite overwhelming. What I'm talking about is maybe giving it a go. If this is not something that you practice regularly, maybe you decide to try it for a few meals during the week. I highly recommend, if you are somebody who eats dinner and you have supportive people around you, or that you can enjoy with friends and family, that is a great time to bring in mindful eating. So if that's mindful eating, and I just gave you a couple of other examples, I'd love for you to put in the chat an example of mindless eating. Mindless eating. So I'll use the word when you're eating on autopilot. Anybody have something that they want to share about mindless? Because I just want to make sure that we're really clear on the difference between the two, being in the moment and not in the moment. So give me another example of something that might show that we were automated or flying on autopilot, or something that we're not fully present with our food.
Bonnie put a good one in. That's eating while standing up or eating in the car.
Oh, yes, good one. I agree. I really agree. Now, what about something like, Paula, what's your favorite show right now? What's your favorite series?
I just finished Succession, which I loved.
Okay, so what if Paula was totally crazy about this series, and she just happened to love chocolate, and she
Have you been to my house?
connected. I wasn't trying to be in your house. I remember you like those goji bees, what is it, goji berries with
Goji berries that were chocolate covered, yes.
on the top. So you know what I mean. And next thing you know, the show is over and Paula has just like emptied the whole container. She didn't give it another thought. She never gave it another thought. Not because Paula was trying to overeat, but Paula was mindlessly eating. She was not present with what she was consuming. She was present with the show, and that was an enjoyable activity, but that falls under the category of mindless eating. And I am not at all saying that Paula did something wrong. Please know that this is not about counting calories. This is not about restrictive dieting. This is not about like gaining weight. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about becoming really present in the moment, which is something that I believe is really important no matter what you're doing, whether or not it's eating or doing your work or whatever. We tend to be multitasking through our day. And with a topic as important as nutrition, especially if you are somebody who's on the healing journey, and you are on the healing journey, this is something that I would highly encourage you to just open your heart, open your mind, and see whether or not it might be something that you could even add to beyond just your prayers for the folks that dialed in on that one. Anybody else have any good examples of mindless eating?
Eating, watching television.
Yes, for sure.
I see so many people as I drive around eating in their car, as Bonnie mentioned also in her comment. I just see that so often. People are chewing, at lights and so forth when you stop and look around. And while it sometimes is necessary and sometimes it's definitely better than starvation, it's not the ideal way to be present with our food and enjoy that nourishment that we're getting. Catherine also writes in, going through email and eating, I guess, eating while working at the computer and doing other things online, which happens to all of us. And I'd imagine also for people who are working through their lunch hours a lot of times.
Right. I use that. I'll give you another example too. I don't know if anybody who's listening grew up in a household where it was really, really important to finish everything on your plate. Now, if that was how you grew up, okay, so that's fine. Whatever way you grew up is the way you grew up. But for those folks, and I'll throw my husband under the bus, that he was encouraged to eat everything on his plate, right? So when you bring this into the mindful eating conversation, sometimes I think getting to the end of your plate before you recognize that you are full would be another subtle nuance example of mindless eating. It was not, I mean, he is very present at our dinner table, but if we are not intuitively and consciously staying with our meal, maybe he didn't really even want to finish that whole meal, or maybe he was full, but he is just on autopilot to finish. So that's a little bit of a subtle example, right? Anybody else, Paula, before I move on?
Eating, watching television, had to clean our plates to get dessert. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got that one. There you go. That's and again, I'm not at all. Please don't misunderstand. That these are just examples to kind of bring you into the conversation. And I think you have it. So I am going to shift gears a little bit now that we know the difference between mindful and mindless. I have a question for you, and you don't have to, it's a rhetorical question. I wonder, as we talk about mindful eating, and then bring in the conversation of gratitude into mindful eating, because oftentimes when, like, for example, when we offer a prayer before a meal, we're offering gratitude for the food. So if we connect the two, the question is this: have you ever stopped to think about what it took to get all of that food onto your plate? Have you ever stopped to think about, from the very beginning, the original sourcing, the seed? Have you ever stopped? Well, if you have or you haven't, I'm going to read you something. I think that this is really fascinating, because if we did really stop and pause to think about what it took to get all of those components onto the plate, I think that it would stop us in our track and we would pause. Because as I read this, I really was in awe. It's not like I didn't give it a thought, but I don't know that I gave it the depth that it deserves. And before I read it to you, I just want to share with you, if on average, the typical American eats 3 times a day, and we rarely take the time to acknowledge where the food came from, that's fascinating to me. Why? Because less than 100 years ago, our grandparents, when they were preparing or getting the food, it looked a lot different. They were going to the butcher. They were going to the local produce stand. They were talking with the farmers. They were eating foods that were in season. But because of our lifestyle and our culture, you can walk out your door, drive less than 5 miles, I'm sure for most of us, and you are confronted with plenty of choices of food sourcing without a single thought and acknowledgement of the work, the effort, the love that it took to bring all of that to your table. So what if we offered gratitude for the sourcing of our food? What if it sounded something like this? I am grateful for the seeds that were cultivated over 100 years ago, over hundreds of years to produce our crops. I am grateful for the nutrient-rich soil that our food grows in. I am grateful for the clean water supply that provides hydration to the roots in the soil. I'm grateful for the weather that provided the perfect growing conditions, the farmers who strategically planned their crop selection, the workers on the farm who perform physical labor to harvest the crops, the lives of the animals that were sacrificed for our nourishment, the truck driver who drove the produce to the store, the grocery store that stocks our local products so that we can easily swing by on our way home from work to pick up ingredients, the grocery store clerk who smiles and helps you at the checkout, and then the person who prepared your food with love. What do you think about that? Throw that in the chat. That is just in a brief, consolidated way. That's a lot to be grateful for. And if we just offered gratitude for our original sourcing, where the food came from, I think that that's a great mindful practice. I just threw the slide in here because, again, I'm not a meat eater, but I live with 4 men. I have a husband and 3 sons, and beef is something that they enjoy. And I just wonder, do we ever pause to really trace it back, to trace it all the way back? Any comments, Paula?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some people here that really can relate to this because they, grew up farming. So Sarah says, as a farmer's daughter, we did know where our food came from because we had milked the cow, churned the butter, made the cottage cheese, hoed the peas and beans, cared for the beef, cattle, and hogs, picked the berries and apples and pears. Wow, that's a lot.
Who was that, Paula? That was Sarah?
That's Sarah. Yeah.
Sarah, you're my goals. I would love to have that now. Are you still doing that? Are you still surrounded by a farm, and can you still have access to those things?
As we're waiting for Sarah to respond,
yes.
Bonnie also reports back in response to, your reflection about where giving gratitude for all the many pieces that had to fall into place for this meal to come before us. She reports that she doesn't think about it necessarily while she's eating, but she does reflect on that.
Amazing. Amazing. Love that. Did Sarah respond? Does she still have access to that farm?
Bonnie says that she was surrounded by farms growing up, so she knew where her food came from and was always grateful for that. Sarah hasn't responded yet, maybe. Oh, here we go. No, she said she married and moved to the suburbs, but did take kids out to local farms to pick berries and things. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Again, paying really close attention to where the original sourcing of our food comes from, beyond just acknowledging the wonderful nutrients that Paula has shared with us over the months. I think that an awareness or a mindfulness strategy to put in place is super important, because we are consuming where that came from. And that goes both ways, whether it came from a natural source or, a healthier source or an unhealthy source. Understanding where your food comes from, I think, is a part of a mindfulness practice that we should all probably, you should do whatever you want, but an invitation to pause and reflect, because I think it would change our mind about some choices that we make, understanding where our food is coming from. So let's keep going. So it's time. So that is where the sourcing came from, which is, again, not necessarily something that we are necessarily doing. So what can we do to bring mindfulness into our meal times? This is my favorite part. Again, totally interactive. We do not have to assume that I know it all. Paula knows it all. I want to hear from you as well. So, but I am going to give you my favorite strategies. Okay, understanding that mealtime moving forward, again, I'm not suggesting every single mealtime, certainly not, but making mealtime a sensory experience is one way to bring mindfulness to your food. There is never a time, in my opinion, that you are more grateful and more mindful and present and aware when you are eating as if you have made it yourself, right? Or made it with somebody you love. When there is time, love, and attention put in something, you're paying attention to the output of that, if that makes sense. So if you're making even the simplest of salads, or you are preparing the main dish, when you put forth the time, the effort, and you are smelling the ingredients, you are touching the ingredients, washing the ingredients, and putting them all together, especially if it's an occasion, that is mindfulness. That is bringing attention and sense in all of your senses to that experience. So perhaps even if you're not a cook, and I'm not suggesting that you add to your already very busy schedule, but even paying attention to your prep work. How is that food getting to your table? Doesn't have to always be on the go, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but pausing to reflect on all the different ingredients of what you're putting on the table will bring you to the present moment, in my opinion. Paula, you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that preparing our food has also kind of fallen by the wayside. And I think it is an essential part of self-care. I think it's really hard to take care of ourselves because food is essential to our being. It's how we're created. And taking the time to nourish ourselves and all of the steps that required, again, it doesn't necessarily mean every single meal is an endless production of prep and cooking, but I think it is an integral part of, self-care. And I think people that are needing to heal from any process in their life need more self-care. And I think that that's just part of how we feel well, is we nourish ourselves well, and preparing our food, especially from time to time at a minimum, is part of that.
Right. When I have the pleasure of working with athletes, I'll often use the analogy of fueling, like the kind of fuel that you would put in a gas tank or whatnot. If you load that car up with crap gas, right, you can't expect that car to be functioning at its highest level, right? And so in this situation, and to your comment, I feel like when you make your food, and again, I'm with you. I am the queen of hacks. I am not suggesting a big, long production. You do not have to, I'm not telling you to go take cooking lessons or anything, but when you physically prepare your food, it slows you down. It slows you down. And it also is giving you an opportunity to acknowledge what you're ingesting is either supporting your health or it's pulling from your health, right? And so being mindful about, especially when you are healing from anything, I think it's really important. And when you go out to eat, again, who doesn't love to go out to eat? Me too. But you kind of lose that control of knowing what's going into your meal. So I love the idea of creating this sensory experience that you are acknowledging colors and smells and textures and whatnot. That is a really great thing. Simple and not overly, involved. We're just saying pause as you are preparing to acknowledge all the senses as you prepare your meal. Okay. So this is a big one. Gratitude changes everything. We talked about this earlier in the origin of where your food comes from, but not just not just being grateful from where it came from, but being grateful for all the things, right? So I really feel like whether it's prayer, whether it's the acknowledgement of where the food comes from, or the people that you are with, simply changing or pausing for a moment to bring awareness to your meal and being thankful for whatever. We used to play this game when the kids were little called high-low, and before we ate, and they used to drive them crazy because it took a period of time. You had to go around the table and say one thing that was a highlight of your day, something you were grateful for, and then something that it was a low light of your day, but you were still grateful for the lesson, right? And so now as the kids have gotten older, it's funny. They're like, remember when you used to make us play high-low? And then I hear them bringing it back when the girlfriends come back to the dinner table. So I know something stuck. So offering gratitude in the form of prayer, acknowledgement, who you're with, where the food came from is always a great idea. Anybody put a gratitude practice in their meal times a little different than anything I said? Feel free to throw it in the chat for Paula to respond to.
I've heard that same. We did do that with the kids when they were young at the table, and they either brought home another name for it or had also shared other people's names for it. It was called Roses and Thorns. What was your rose?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, so I was going to show you before we moved on to this one. This is what we do now. And I have to tell you, if something were to happen to this, I don't know if you all can see, it says grateful on here. It says grateful on here. And it doesn't necessarily have to be right at the mealtime, but I have come to cherish this jar. My children, my nieces and my nephew, my parents, if it's an occasion, I just have paper and a pen and they'll throw something in there. Or if it's something that I've done that they appreciate or whatever, I do that. I don't think that they all have jars, but I do. I mean, I keep them. And sometimes when I go in there and I reflect back, it brings a tear to my eye because it takes me right back to that exact moment. So it can be joy in both directions, not just mama offering the activity. When you get it back and just pausing to realize that that's somebody acknowledging something, it is a great thing. It's actually on my dining room table and I keep it there all year round. I actually have a little butterfly that sits on top that represents, many of you know that I lost my brother a couple of years ago, but this is really important to me. I just love being able to look in there and see little notes of gratitude for either something that is happening at that mealtime or maybe Thanksgiving or or whatnot. So feel free to take that idea. That's a good one. All right, the table in and of itself. Oh my goodness, nothing says mindful eating than setting a beautiful table. I have a funny feeling, and I don't know this to be true, but I bet you Paula has a rockin' table. If I know Paula well enough, there's usually flowers, maybe there's a candle lit. Tell me, Paula, am I right?
If you come on Thanksgiving or I mean, definitely not on an everyday basis. No. I do not make a beautiful table on the everyday. But
so how about, do you use the good china? Do you use the good china and good glasses and stuff, or do you just use the everyday? That was a tip a long time ago. I'm like, really? I should take out the good stuff. But again, setting a table where you want to sit is another part of this, and being mindful about our meals. So I don't know that I pull out the good china, but I do try to set me a good table. I do.
Good for you.
Yes. Anybody else? Let me know, and let Paula know so she can share with me. Anybody else when they set a table, it's intentional, it's with awareness, and the beauty of the table kind of brings them in terms of wanting to be aware and mindful. I see somebody just chimed in. Anything good?
Yeah, Bonnie says that it reminds her what you're speaking of the saying that life is short, use the good china.
Oh yeah, and you know who said that? It was my girl, my queen, Oprah. Oprah's like,
Oh,
use
yeah.
the china, use the china. So yeah, so pull it out, buy yourself fresh flowers, light a candle, do whatever you need to do. That is a way to bring mindfulness to your meals. So now we're going to get into a little bigger of a mindfulness exercise. This happens to be one of my specialty areas. I work with a lot of folks with mindfulness, and sometimes the pause attached to a very good breath is enough to kind of recenter and ground. We know, and again, I'm picking on dinner time. This can happen at any meal, but I'm going to stay with the theme, which is dinner time. We have had a very busy day. We are probably on the phone and, talking with children, picking up from sports, talking with parents, whatever it is. Oftentimes we arrive at the dinner table frazzled. And what that really looks like and means is that we are way up the chain of what's called your sympathetic response. And that is your fight or flight response, right? If you have things that are on your mind, you're super busy, you are just feeling wound tight and you are feeling up here energetically, right? And so taking a moment to find a really good breath is a great nervous system hack. And what I mean by that, as I just told you, oftentimes we're way up here and we need to invoke what's called the parasympathetic response. That is our rest and digest mode. Rest and digest. That is the opposite of being up here. That is the place where we can relax, right? And so sometimes just even putting your hands on the table, pausing, back to the prayer, back to, offering gratitude, but you could even do something like taking a relaxing breath. So I'm going to teach you that. One hand on heart, one hand on belly. As a culture, we tend to breathe up top here in the top part of our lung space, but where the really good stuff is down here, initiating breath from the diaphragm area. And so the breath looks like this. It's an inhale for 4, and then it's an exhale for 4. Let's try it together. One hand on heart area, one hand right underneath your rib cage. We take a breath in, inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, and we exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. We inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, and we exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. One more time. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. You can drop your hands and breathe naturally. And just a quick recap of that. When I say initiate from the diaphragm, if you watch a baby breathe, you will notice that their belly expands on their inhale, right? All of us started our lives like that. And based on our busy lives, we tend to get up here. What's wrong with that? Well, we're not able to take a full relaxing breath, get into all parts of the lung space. It makes a difference, and it's probably another episode of one of our sessions, but trust me when I tell you, 3 to 5 rounds of this balancing 4x4 breath will set the stage no matter what you're doing. If you just even, it's almost like a little bit of a transition move. You just pause and take a few breaths. You can add in any other mindful techniques that you want, but even taking a conscious, intentional breath is a beautiful way to bring awareness to your meals. I see that we have a comment in there, Paula. Anything that I need to comment on? Because we're getting to the end here. Oh, you're on mute there.
Oh, sorry. I don't see any new comments.
Okay. So Excellent. So any questions about the breath technique, throw them in the chat, but that is yet another way. I'm also going to offer you another one. So if that is breath, right after that, and I do these techniques myself, as I showed you with my gratitude jar, and sometimes I'll take 3 to 5 balancing or relaxing breaths, but what I always do is I set an intention, whether it's in the form of prayer or what I'm going to share with you right now. I'm going to offer you an intention moving forward. So the hand goes back on the heart area, back underneath the rib space. And it sounds like this. The intention that I would set before a meal would be, May this food provide me healing and strength. May this food provide me healing and strength. Setting the intention, getting your mind in the right space goes miles. You don't have to use mine, but it's just an example of what I'm trying to do before I take my very first bite. May this food or this meal provide me with healing and strength. Anybody else? Paula, you do any intention settings that you want to share? Any I am statements or?
Yeah, I do. I say my own little prayer to myself typically, versus, having it, done as a family. And I do ask that, my body be loved and nourished by the food before me.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Anybody listening, if you've got a one that you want to share, you can throw that in the chat as well. We're coming really to the end here. I just have a few other examples, and I think our guest, Paula, actually touched on them, but I don't think anybody's commented on the picture on the right. But my last three mindful exercises don't necessarily have anything to do with mindfulness in the moment that you're eating. But one way that you can start the process of understanding gratitude as a practice is to find a local produce stand, buying seasonally. Paula taught us that really well in our earlier sessions, but there is nothing like going yourself or going with a group of people, maybe picking your own or actually seeing where your food came from that brings you right there in that moment to understand the big process of getting our food to the plate. You could even take it a step further. Paula and I are in Maryland, and we have lots and lots of choices to go visit farms. You could even go and visit an actual farm that's not necessarily selling produce to kind of talk to a farmer, really understand what the process is to get fruits and vegetables to you, and the whole kind of chain supply where it ends up in our grocery stores. Fascinating, really fascinating, because we are creatures that are busy these days, and I don't think that we really recognize that there's a lot of steps to get you that food on your table. So the last one is something I purchased twice, one for myself and one for my mama. This is a tabletop hydroponic garden. And it is made by, not this picture, it's made by somebody else in this picture, but the one that I got was called Arrow Garden. Paula, have you heard of this company, Arrow Garden?
I have.
Yeah. Do you have one by any chance?
Yeah.
So this is really fascinating. You can see in that black base there, it kind of looks like a well. And you find, you can buy them in all different sizes, but there is a light overhead. And then there's these holes in the top of the base that you drop in the pods of seeds. It's self-watering and then self-lit. So it follows the course of daytime, nighttime. So when I first got it, I was like, I'm pretty good on the impulse retail purchase. It looked really good. And I thought, well, I'll just see what it is. It is so much fun. One, two, it becomes like this piece of art on your kitchen tabletop. My mother tends to rotate out the herbs in there. And now where we are is like, shoot, I wish I had a bigger one, but the countertop is the countertop. So those three would be ways to get connected to your food before you start bringing mindfulness into your plate. So that's what I have for you today. I did put a little cutie pie picture. Let me show you. There's my cutie pie picture of this puppy dog. He made it. It's time for questions. It's time for questions. But I realized that I did have one last comment, Paula, forgive me. I'm going to put this information in the recording. So Paula and I are providing you with some resources that you will find in that replay link. But the last thing I want to say is about the cancering journey. Okay. The cancering journey. I just want to bring the conversation all the way home with mindfulness. So when you develop a mindful, grateful practice to eating and the sourcing of your food and whatnot, what I have come to realize is that one of the biggest benefits of this is that you recognize and you intentionally choose what you are going to consume. So as I said to you earlier, I know that it's overwhelming. I call it the wild, wild west of nutrition on purpose because we're all trying to figure out the right foods. But what I'm saying to you is when you sit down and you mindfully eat and you recognize that the bite that you take makes me feel really good, or the bite that you take makes me feel really bad, you have a really good understanding of being intuitive and in touch with the body's response. And that is absolutely opposite of mindless eating. So instead of, it's just an invitation, instead of viewing the journey as the things that you are being taken away from you, I offer you the invitation to find the foods that, as Paula mentioned, nourish the mind, the body, and the soul. Because again, going back to the quote, where your energy is going matters. And I guarantee you, if you stop and pause, you will recognize that some of the food choices that you're sad about releasing actually don't make you feel that great after you consume them. So I just thought it was worthy to say that reframe, this food makes me feel great. This food makes me feel like I am healing. So just another tool in your toolkit. I'm going to pause, stop, and find out if there's any final questions. We finished right on time, and you guys stayed with me each step of the way, which I so appreciate. Fielding any questions for Paula or myself.
Yeah. Can you go back to that resource slide for
Yes. Well, there's something missing on there, which is the reason why I didn't show it. I do have a couple of podcasts, but I do want to clear them with Paula ahead of time, and we just didn't have enough time. So
yeah, if you could just leave that up for people as it is,
yeah,
they still want to grab that.
Absolutely.
And we have a couple comments. Janine wanted to know if you used a specific type of seed for your countertop growing.
Organic.
Okay. All right. Any kind of specific organic thing?
Well, Arrow Garden offers their own, but I'm always very weary. So you can purchase the pods themselves, and then you can add to them, which I hear lately. That's what I get into, because I want to have total control of where the seed came from, and then the soil that I'm putting it in. And for that matter, the filtered water that goes in the well. I mean, you can really get creative. Somebody could argue like you could get over the top, but I look at this as not as a challenge. I look at it as an opportunity. And when you grow in your own food, it matters. It matters. So if I'm going to take that kind of time to grow my food, I'm going to make sure it's the best, right? So Arrow Garden, go on that website. I will put the link the one that I use on there, and then you can kind of take it from there. They're all fairly the same. I haven't had the experience with all of them, but when I did read the reviews and whatnot, they all kind of operate in the same direction.
Yeah. We have a couple comments here that came in. Sarah writes, Vivian Howard, who's the chef at the Chef and Farmer, which is locally sourced food in North Carolina. She's on PBS TV and takes her twins out to various farms to pick vegetables and find out where their food comes from.
Love it.
And Luann mentions that when she is eating something sweet that she's really been craving, she intentionally eats it in silence, where she can really focus on and enjoy it.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, so people instinctively, I think if we can quiet ourselves enough to even in any way, shape, or form, we intuitively know these things.
Yes, we
it's
do.
just sometimes we're so overstimulated by the world that we forget.
Yeah, and maybe not even forget. Maybe it's just that we don't have a thought on it. And again, the whole reason why we started Food for Thought is to give you very general, doable, relatable information that makes sense, right? And we all, as you mentioned, most of this is intuitive, and we know. But now, when we put a mindful eye on it, I think it changes the conversation, because I often will hear people say, I'm so upset. I really loved my name it, potato chip, chocolate chip and whatnot. So enjoy that, but do it mindfully, because I guarantee you, if you do it mindfully and you're paying attention to the sensations, the taste and whatnot, you're not going to go through a whole bag, because you're not watching a show and you're giving that all the attention.
Right.
It's a thought.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was great. So much
Yeah,
good,
yes. Well,
so much great food for thought.
It felt strange being the one in the hot seat, but I think we both did a great job in supporting each other. And listen, I am giving kudos to our audience, because you know what I love? I love that there's my corny phrase. It doesn't have to be that we are the sages on the stage. We can be the guide on the side, and you all have a lot more knowledge than you believe. Trust yourself, trust yourself. And as we travel together, I think that empowering you with agreed upon tools is just might be what you need to push yourself to the next level and continue your healing journey. That's my hope anyway. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of both of us, is that the whole purpose is to support you in getting to over here, which is NED, feeling healthy, feeling great, feeling inspired, so that you can then pay it forward to somebody else. So with that, Miss Paula, as always, I appreciate you. To our listeners, I appreciate you. We have another speaker next month, which I'm not going to tell you about right now. You have to wait for the email, but please know that you can reach out to me, Stacy@believebig.org, for any questions at all. If you forget that, I'm on the website. Paula is available for new clients and questions that you might have. If you don't remember her contact information, no worries, you're going to contact me and I'm going to push you straight on forward. So if you are somebody who wants the additional support, who needs the specifics wrapped around a diagnosis, Paula's your gal, and I highly endorse, thumbs up, and you can find her via Believe Big as well. So thank you again. I hope that you have a wonderful Wednesday. For those people who are not on the call and you might know somebody, feel free to push them the recording. And as always, I love your feedback if you don't mind. You take care.
Thank you, Stacy. That was great. Thank you.